Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is nutrition, and we're going to discuss the nutritional differences between men and women. So this was a listener request, and apparently they wanted to get me in trouble. So you'll find out more towards the end of the podcast why I joke about that. But what we're going to discuss here is kind of like the actual food details of whether there actually should be nutritional differences when writing diet plans or nutrition plans for men versus women. Then we're going to talk about what the physiological differences are and what the psychological differences are. And at the end of this, you're going to come to the conclusion that there is no great, wonderful excuse as to why somebody might not be successful in diets, and they can hang their hat on that excuse. Everybody, it just comes down to diet adherence and finding the right diet for you. So there's no special reason why you're not good at dieting. So this will be fun to realize this. So some people love to hang their hat on excuses and say, oh, it's not me, it's this. Well, we're going to find out if that's true. Okay? So everything I'm going to present in the podcast here is not an exhaustive list, but it's a couple good fun facts to cover on some general topics. And the reason why I want to say this is there would probably be well over an hour, if not 2 or 3 hours, to really discuss the truest, innermost details of dieting for men versus women, especially if you're going to combine like psychological versus physiological. So there's a lot of differences between men and women in regards to the psychological aspects of diets. So I'm going to present some of that here, but it's not an overwhelming, exhaustive list. It's to get everybody kind of thinking and hitting the highlights that I see most often come up with diets. And also what I'm going to discuss here is generalities. So this is generally true. It absolutely is not going to be true in all cases. So, and I mean more so regards to like diet adherence. So I'm going to say that in general, men tend to adhere to diets better than women do. Now, women will most likely get slightly offended by that, and they're going to say, what about this? And I'm more so talking about general, and then we're going to discuss about short-term versus long-term adherence. So women actually tend to do better with short-term adherence, but men do better with long-term adherence. So we're going to discuss some of those differences. So as I go through this, if you hear anything that you're like, well, I don't think that's true, hold on a second. Let me explain it some. And then if you still want to wrestle with me a little bit, I actually love having open-minded discussions about details in nutrition, because I always have something to learn. So you can always email me if you ever have like, hey, in this podcast you said this. Would you mind explaining that more? Or I found the opposite to be true. Please email me. It's super duper fun to see various perceptions, and it's always a learning opportunity for me. Either I get to solidify knowledge I have in learning how to explain it in more detail, or I get presented with something new and it kind of challenges my way of thinking, and I have to grow as a nutritionist and a person. So I love feedback. So please, anytime you want to send something, our email is brutalironGym@gmail.com. Cool. Okay, so let's look at the actual food details. Like, if a man eats a banana and a woman eats a banana, what are the differences? So let's look at that. In general, there is no difference when you're trying to create a healthy diet. And this would be a diet for weight gain, for performance, for aesthetic maximizing. This was a weird way of wording that. Or fat loss. It's just a regimented or structured way of eating is what I would typically refer to as a diet. So it doesn't mean fat loss. But the general rules of a structured way of eating are universally correct, okay, for males versus females. So in podcast number 41, titled Diet Right, What Matters Most, we discussed that you're going to get the most bang for your buck in terms of where you focus your energy, and it has the most influence on your diet is calories. So overall calories, how many calories you eat per day, is more important than whether something's organic or not. Okay, whether something's wheat or white, in terms of like breads or bagels and stuff like that. So it also, overall calories is more impactful than whether you have 1 meal, 2 meals, 3 meals, or 7 meals a day. Okay, So overall calories are by far the biggest, most important thing that you have to account for, and that's males or females. The second most important thing is protein intake. You have to eat the right amount of protein. And typically for most people that would be referred, like we'd commonly think of it as eating enough protein, because most people undereat protein. And the reason why this is extremely beneficial is a very long list of reasons. And you can actually go listen to podcast number 33, okay, which is how much protein do I need? So that'll tell you even more details. But having enough protein helps enormously with body composition, helps with body repair, kind of the way you, like even water retention. It helps with so many things in your body. So protein is kind of what our body fixes and repairs itself with. Carbs and fats are kind of the fuel of the body. So I can run a car with gasoline as long as I want, but it's going to die and not do very well if I never take it in to get maintenance, right? So protein is maintenance, carbs and fats are fuel. So if you think of your body as a machine, you need to maintain and take care of that machine. And that's what protein does. So as making sure you have enough protein is super duper important for health. And it actually does help with like meal satiation in terms of feeling fuller at meals, making sure you have enough protein in your meal so you don't have to overeat carbs and fats to feel full. And it does a whole bunch of other benefits to it. So, but podcast 33 discusses that. So the second most important thing after you would address calories is to address, do you have the correct amount of protein in your diet? And that would be male or female, okay? That's the second most important thing. The third most important thing is meal timing. So how many meals you eat a day, like when you eat certain, like when do I eat carbs versus when do I eat fats? Like when should I have the bulk of my calories versus when should I kind of taper off? So is it true that we should eat nothing after 7 p.m.? You know, all those kind of like goofy things we hear, you know, and how important really is breakfast. So when people say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, is that really true? And if it is true, why? So we discussed that in podcast number 249, titled Meal Timing, okay? So we also have a podcast on meal frequency. So 249 is meal timing, and the meal frequency podcast is 329, okay? 329 is meal frequency effects on diets. So 329. And the meal timing is 249. So you can kind of go look those up, and that'll give you a little more detail if you would like the detail, if you want to learn more about that specifically. The last thing we have is micronutrient quality, or macronutrient quality, sorry. Macro versus micro, by the way, is micronutrients are vitamins and minerals. Macronutrients are protein, carbs, and fat, and water, if you want to be all technical. So macronutrient quality. So making sure you have, you know, whether it's wheat bread versus white bread, whether it's organic or not, you know, like all that kind of stuff. That's when it matters, is after you would address calories, protein intake, and meal timing. And that's all true, male versus female. Those are just facts unrelated to gender. Okay? Now, one of the phrases I kind of have that I use as an example all the time is a banana is a banana. So a banana does the same to a 70-year-old as it does to a 7-year-old. So they just might need different amounts. And that's something to think of. So food is kind of universal. So a banana is, you know, sugars, it's carbs. It's our body can break it down to make glucose, which is like sugar in the blood essentially. And it's what our body kind of runs off. It's a very fast digesting fuel. Our brain uses it. Our body uses it for fuel. So it's like I put a gasoline, whether I put gasoline in like oh gosh, like a Saturn car versus a Pontiac car, you know, and I know there's certain types of gasoline, like there's like what, 87, 89, 91, whatever the hell those numbers mean, but different types of unleaded. So, but in a sense, like Ferraris run off gasoline, station wagons run off gasoline. Gasoline is just gasoline. Please, all the motorheads, just let me go with this analogy. So just forgive me for my ignorance, okay? But that's the idea. So you can think of quality of gasolines as quality of carbs. So whether I'm running off of Pop-Tarts or sweet potatoes is a little bit of the difference between like gasoline qualities. But still, like Pop-Tarts and sweet potatoes are both carbs. Gasoline is carbs, it's energy, okay? So hopefully I didn't over-apologize for that analogy, and hopefully it still made sense. But So there really is no gender difference in terms of how to structure diets. Now, do different genders respond differently to carbs versus fats? Nope. Okay, doesn't work that way. So I've had men who did diets based off like fats and proteins and very little carbs, and they did great. I've had other men who had tried that, and it was a train wreck and horrible. They were miserable moods all day, had no energy whatsoever. We put them on a higher carb diet, and all of a sudden they felt amazing. And I've had the same be true for women. So some women run perfectly great. Their bodies are fine with being high fat or high carb or blending somewhere in the middle. So we've talked about this in every single podcast I've made, that you have to find the blend of carbs versus fats that works for you. So I am not a big believer in a really high fat diet being the only way to diet, or a high carb diet being the only way to diet. So you have to just find the balance that works best for your body type. So there has not been a single style that seems to work better for men than women, or vice versa. Okay. And by the way, I've had well over 1,000 clients. I stopped counting at 1,000. Sorry, I need to talk slower here. And I've been doing this for 17 years. I have a master's in nutrition, so I've well experienced with a high degree of volume of people. And so it's not like I've only ever trained like 12 people, and that's why I can't see a difference. So I've trained well over 1,000. I used to teach at the university for 7 years, and I had well over 500 students there. So I have a pretty high degree of a number of people that I've interacted with in regards to nutrition, and you'll find all extremes. So there are extremes as many to the left as there are to the right. So right down the middle tends to be kind of most true for most people. And that's why at the very beginning we said that there's generalities. So you might say that I really like having high carbs, and I know my other friend who's just the same gender as me likes really high carbs, so that must be true. Well, out of a population of 2, that's not really the best scientific data. So, but in general, not one gender responds better or worse to carbs versus fats. Okay, now there are some physiological differences in terms of how the body just works. And this shows up in often I'll get the question, or you'll just hear the question of, why do men seem to lose weight faster than women? So sometimes people will say, oh man, men lose weight so much easier, blah, 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 blah. And that is true, that our perception of fat loss is greater in men than it is in women. So here's a couple points. Is typically men are heavier than women. So typically you're going to find more 250-pound men than you would 250-pound women. So if a 250-pound man loses 10% of his body weight, that's 2.5 pounds. Okay? If a 150-pound female loses 10% of her body weight, that's only 1.5 pounds. So they both have lost 10%. So their rate of weight loss is equal, but the amount of weight lost is not. So it's really important that you look at success of diets in percentage of weight lost, not in pounds of weight lost. That'll help you really see the equality between fat loss, and better understand why there's really no nutritional differences between men and women. There's a ton of things I'm about to clear up about that last statement. But in general, you'll see a man can maybe lose, like he'll go through a month, and he might lose 10 pounds in a month, and a woman might only lose 6. But in percentages of body weight, they might actually be totally equal, or the woman might have actually lost more. So you have to take that into account. Are you looking at pounds of weight lost or percentage of weight lost? So that's very important to look at. Another thing we have is, since men are just way more typically, and again, this is all generalities, so just go with the concept here, is since men tend to weigh more, their overall movement, their exercise, burns more calories. The heavier you are, the more calories it takes to move yourself around. So if you took a 150-pound female and you took a 200-pound male, you put a 50-pound weight vest on the female, and now she weighs 200 pounds, they're going to burn very similar calories. Now, there are going to be some differences due to muscle tissue, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But generally, since men weigh more, their movements burn more calories. And that's another reason why often men and women will maybe exercise together. So maybe a husband and wife, they go out and they start walking in the evening. And all of a sudden, like after a week or two, it's like, what the hell? The guy's losing more weight. First of all, are you looking at pounds or percentages? And second of all, it took more effort for the guy to move himself around than it did the female. So he burned more calories walking than the female did. So that's something else. The last thing we're going to look at, like physiologically, because like I said, I could go on for like an hour if I wanted to, but it would be overwhelming and too much information, is muscle mass. So muscle mass is, there's kind of a general term we would refer to called metabolically active. And what this means is that muscle mass kind of burns up calories. It uses more calories than fat mass does. So like a pound of muscle chews up more calories per day, uses up more calories than a pound of fat. So if you have more muscle mass, you will burn more calories at rest or at movement. So not only overall weight, but also more muscle. So the more muscle you have, the more calories you burn throughout the day, whether you're sitting still or moving around. So since men tend to have more muscle, that's another reason why they tend to burn more calories than women do, even doing the same levels of activity. Okay, so that's a couple things to think of. So think of weight loss in percentages, not pounds, and then recognize it's just since men are bigger and heavier, they're going to kind of burn more calories with the same level of activity. So they're going to seem to have faster rates of progress than women because they'll burn more calories doing the same freaking things as women do. So the next thing we look at here is when it comes to food selections. So trying to pick like what food you should eat in your diet. In general, men have less emotional connection to food. Men are less likely to emotionally soothe themselves using food. So women will sometimes drink wine at night as a way to de-stress, which then makes them feel like they're a failure on their diet and they stress even more. So it doesn't seem very effective. But women are more likely to soothe with food than men are. And men also just have general less emotional connection. So sometimes a woman can eat food and that'll just make her happy because it was a diet. It was either a food that reminds her of her childhood, or the food itself just kind of made her feel good because it was sweet in her mouth and it was just something that she likes. Therefore, she's going to feel better. So women tend to have that effect more than men do. So again, this is going to lead to, all this leads to men tend to do better with eating the same things more often and not really giving a crap. So they'll come home and they'll be like, well, what do you want to have for dinner? I don't really care. There's many reasons why they don't care. And we'll get to some more funny ones here in a second. But since men don't seem to be as emotionally connected with food, they haven't really thought about food all day. They don't really give a crap. They can eat the same, heat up food that you cooked last night, and they're most likely not going to care much. Okay, whereas women tend to think more about food more often than about food. So they'll think of like a fun meal idea, and maybe that perks them up and makes them excited. And also, they're typically the ones making the damn food. So guys need to step up and help out. But they're more likely to have to think about food during the day. So there's actually some food in the house and someone planned dinner. So therefore, they're going to get kind of creative and fun and think of a really fun food. And that becomes their attachment to the food. Okay. So, I will laugh and say this joke here. I don't know why I'd be afraid to offend you guys, because I probably say something offensive every single podcast. But the women that I've had who say, oh, I don't really care about food, just write me a diet that's the same food every day. Oh, I can't stand writing those diets because I know I'm going to rewrite the damn thing in about a week because the woman's going to say, oh, I'm gotten tired of eggs. Can I have something else? It's like, damn it, that's why we were going to give you options at first. So they'll say, I don't want options, just tell me what I should have. Then the second you make that one, they go, I want options. And it's like, damn it. It's like I just wrote that thing. So, and then I always laugh, and this is cliche, is like restaurant choices. So when you're going out with your girlfriend or wife or, spouse, is like, where do you want to eat? The typical thing is for the guy to say, well, I don't care. He probably cares to some degree, but he doesn't care enough to argue, and he knows that whatever he suggests, you're going to pick something else anyhow. So it's always one of those things. So women will say, well, I don't care either, you pick. You'll probably care, and you'll have some reason why you didn't want certain things, and typically the guy's going to pick some like garbage food barbecue thing, where like the special thing is like the sauce on the wings and they're like triple fried. So the woman's gonna be like, hell no, I'm not eating that garbage. So men, in women's defense, men do usually they don't support or help in any way. So the woman is stuck making all the choices, and they get tired of making the choices. Decision fatigue gets tiring. And then often men, your choices suck and they're not health based. So the woman does not want to eat there. So they don't want to eat at something where the restaurant sign is a pig. That's almost 100% true. Okay. So, but that leads into the next thing is a person's level of decision fatigue. So how many decisions they have to make per day will affect how much they care about food. If someone has to make a lot of decisions for work or whatever the heck they do during the day, and then they're asked at the end of the day to make another decision and have it be food-based, they're going to say they don't give a crap because they had other decisions all day. They're tired of making choices. So unfortunately, moms, you get stuck with making the food choices all the time. So you get fatigued and you're trying to be creative because you don't want to have the same thing because somebody's going to whine about it and blah, 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 blah. So it does get tiring to always be the one making decisions. So it's nice if you live in a household with two adults, okay? It's nice to share in that. So, and try to make decisions, together. So it does help. But decision fatigue. So I found for people who work very stressful jobs, male or female, that their diets, they do usually much better with food adherence because they don't give a shit. So it's just whatever is efficient and effective and close to them and convenient, they'll eat it. And then also they tend not to have enormous amounts of cravings, and they tend to do fine with kind of general adherence because what they eat per day doesn't seem to matter much to them. They have more important decisions to make every day. So they'll do whatever is convenient. So when I write their diets, I make sure that whatever we pick is a convenience factor, not necessarily a health factor or a taste factor. Now, of course, I want them to be healthy, but I'm not going to pick something with no regard to convenience. So for clients like that, I'm going to make sure that convenience is a factor. So that helps improve their adherence to their diets. So just think about that. The more decisions you make, the less likely you are to care about food. So hormonal changes. So since women go through hormonal fluctuations every month, they're going to have differing degrees and concerns about food. So maybe 1 week of the month, they're not going to give a shit what you eat. The next week of the month, if you suggest the wrong thing, they're going to cut your throat. So that just seems to be the way it works. So it's not in their control. They didn't choose that. Mother Nature chose it for them, so don't get mad at them. So it's just the way it works. So since women also tend to have fluctuations in hormones that fluctuate what they're interested in eating, they're going to have more variance to what they eat. And the more you vary your foods in your diet, the more likely you are to have cravings when you are controlling calories. So when someone is in a minor caloric restriction for fat loss, and they have a high variety of food, their body then tends to think that there's more options available. So it'll send cravings, and they'll have more intense cravings and more high frequency of cravings. Whereas if somebody does not break away from their food much, and they just kind of eat the same things all the time, the body doesn't feel that there's an option, and it'll just kind of go ho-hum along with the diet, and you'll have lower degrees of cravings. So I take advantage of this, knowing this as a nutritionist. So I've done a couple diets in my life where it were pretty extreme. So I've done 3 diets where I lost 50 pounds in 10 weeks or less. I one time did a diet where I lost 50 pounds in 8 weeks. And during those diets, I ate the exact same food at every single meal. I limited my food choices as much as possible because it reduced my cravings. If your body thinks the only thing it has the option of eating more of is the same crap it's already been eating all day, it doesn't send a craving. So it's less likely to be extreme in that way. So if you are experiencing extreme cravings while you're trying to diet for fat loss, you can think of, okay, well, how often am I changing my food choices? If I change and I'm always kind of shifting back and forth, that's going to create more instability, and I might have a higher degree of cravings due to that instability. Another thing to look at that I don't even have on my notes here is avoiding sugar-free items that have high sugar alcohol. So if you're chewing sugar-free gum like a pack a day, you're going to have digestive issues that aren't related to your actual foods. It's because you're eating like your body's weight worth of like sugar alcohol. And then the sweetness of sugar alcohol still gives your tongue and your brain the sensation of sweetness. So therefore it'll say, oh wow, there's something sweet. Oh crap, there was no calories. We want calories. What else tastes really sweet and is fun to eat but has calories? So it'll all of a sudden give you cravings to try to find other sweet foods, but ones that contain calories. Okay? So, next thing I want to touch on here is adherence levels. So I've already mentioned it a little bit, that men tend to have better adherence because they aren't as emotionally attached to food. And they don't have the emotional kind of hormonal swings and stuff related. So, and also they're less likely to self-soothe with food. So self-soothing stress. So men in general tend to have better adherence long term. Women, you are some manly, tough people, okay? You can handle your shit. You can do exceptionally well and rock a diet and be freaking amazingly perfect. But it does tend to be more in short spurts. So women in the short term tend to do better with meal adherence or diet adherence than men. But they also tend to kind of change their mind more often. They tend to change goals more often. They tend to become more influenced by stress. So if a life event happens, they're more likely to break away from their diet due to that life event. So they're more likely to have variances over time to their diet. So therefore, they'll have times where they rock it and they do perfect. They'll have times where they're not even on the damn diet and they're messing up every single meal. And they say, screw it, what does it matter, blah, 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 blah. So women tend to be very hot and cold, whereas men tend to be lukewarm continually forever. Okay? So in the long term, men tend to do better with diet adherence than women do. So, often people, this is the part where people get mad at me, okay? So is often people who struggle with dieting will hate the things I said here is because I didn't really provide anything that was a special little excuse or reason why you may not be doing diets, why everybody else seems to do well with diets, but you don't. Okay? There's really no fancy reason or excuse that you can really use. And I know that it's hard for people to hear because you've struggled, you've really put your best into it, and it just never seems to go well. And it's very frustrating. You put a lot of emotion into it. So for someone like me to say like, oh, it's not this, it's not that, it's you. That sucks. Like that doesn't feel good. I know it doesn't feel good because I've had things like that in my life. Okay. Where I've had moments where I struggled doing this thing or that thing, like maybe it was in business or maybe it was a personal life thing. Okay. Like interactions with family or friends or just various things in my life where when I looked at why it wasn't being successful, I had to look and realize, okay, it's me. It didn't happen. It didn't work in scenario A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So A to Z, it didn't seem to work. And everything was different from A to Z except for one thing. And the one thing that was constant was me. So I have had to realize that I am the problem in many situations of my life. That's bummer, that's true, but when I accepted it and I worked on myself, then it seemed to do better. Okay? So, I don't want to discourage you and say you're the problem, you're a failure, blah, blah, blah. That's not true. You're freaking awesome and you probably rocked every little thing you did. It just wasn't structured properly for you. And therefore it failed. We either didn't go into it with the right mindset or the right setup. But you can do this and you can be successful in diets if you find the one that's right for you. Okay? So how to make a diet successful, whether you're male or female, is to find dieting parameters that adhere to the rules of podcast number 49. It absolutely, whatever your parameters are, must address calories, must address protein intake, must address meal timing. The rest of it will fall into place. But if your parameters address those three, and they address them in ways that cause the least amount of change to your lifestyle, okay, where it's convenient to make the changes rather than having to overhaul your entire life, okay? If you can find the parameters that match that, you're going to be extremely successful. And if you add in tracking adherence, not results. So you need to track your adherence to dieting, not the results of your dieting. Too often our results, we've talked about this in past podcasts, weight loss is not linear. Okay, the scale is not going to show minus 2 pounds, like minus 0.2 pounds every single day. So weight loss fluctuates for a billion reasons. And we've actually talked about this in the past podcast. Let me look this up real quick. So if you're tracking results only by a scale, the number on the scale can change for an enormous variety of reasons that can happen every single day. So in podcast number 5, way back when, podcast number 5, we discuss weight loss is not linear. And it's important that we recognize that. When we recognize that weight loss is not linear, okay, meaning that weight loss is kind of, it doesn't follow a nice easy pattern. It kind of goes up one day, really down one day, stays the same one day. If you are to track that, you're never going to really know how you're doing because that damn number changes all the time. But if you track adherence, not results, you are going to do much better long term because the adherence is what you can control every single day. It's consistent every single day. Therefore, you can track what you do every single day. Okay? So, in podcast number 293, we discuss methods to improve diet adherence. So you can check that one out. So you have to find parameters that address the concepts of calories, protein intake, and meal timing.